Oh, hi! My name is Aaron, this is my show Reeducation, and welcome to the How to Revolution series, a series of videos where I explain praxis on how we can perform a modern revolution. And even though I do understand that this series has only been out for a few months now, I kind of have no choice but to re-release it. Every single one of the videos has been copyright striked, flagged, or demonetized into oblivion, much like most of the videos on my channel. Anybody who says that left-wingers don't get hit with the same kind of censorship as anybody else does on this platform can basically go fuck themselves. By the way, in an unrelated note, please check out my Patreon. Every dollar does honestly help fund this show, 'cause YouTube certainly doesn't. Anyway, there are a couple of caveats that I want to make before we go into it. The first of which being that I did have to change around some of the music so I didn't get hit with copyright strikes. That's kind of obvious. And the second one being that I do make a comment in this video where I talk about how I don't think that it's a great idea to wear masks at protests or in demonstrations. Now, I do think that for the most part, wearing masks does project a certain amount of bad optics. Optics are something that we do have to pay attention to on occasion. But with that being said, if you're in a situation where things go south and you do need a mask, for God's sakes, wear one. I don't want anybody to get hurt here, and I really, hopefully, don't want anybody to take away from this video that they should go into a situation where they should have been wearing a mask and then end up in prison or worse because they didn't. So with all of that, if you're anything like me, then you're probably out there looking everywhere you can to learn how to revolution. And if that is you, this is your video. With all that being said, let's get started. You know, it's interesting, through the course of history, you tend to notice that things don't necessarily repeat themselves, but they do somewhat echo. And something that's been constantly echoing through my brain recently is the old saying, you have to know thy enemy as you know thyself. So, let's talk about ourselves. What exactly is our goal? I mean, a lot of you out there are Marxists, Leninists, socialists, anarchists like myself. It would be to fight fascism, right? Okay, well, to know exactly how to fight fascism, we have to know what fascism is. So what exactly is the definition of fascism? Well, an old but very correct definition would be the belligerent nationalist dictatorship of the extreme right, typically achieved through the merging of state and business. So that would mean that to fight fascism, we would have to fight the state. So how exactly would we go about doing something like that? That sounds like an incredibly large task. I don't know how we would even be able to begin to achieve such a thing. And my answer would be through direct action. So you're probably saying to yourself, oh, so now we need to go around hitting people, right? Wrong. Direct action doesn't necessarily mean violent action. It just means that you don't rely on politics. The way that I like to look at it is, don't punch the Nazi, punch the message. Sometimes you still have to punch the Nazi, though. How do we go about doing this? How do we initiate direct action? The best thing to do is to think tactically. Now, there are a few things that you have to know. Nazis, and neoliberals for that matter, are basically just the hired goons of the state. They work for capital. They are not necessarily the elites. They are not necessarily the ones in control. They are hired goons. What happens when you punch them? Well, punching the goons feels really good, but it looks really bad to potential allies. You have to remember something. The right wing, the far right, the extreme right, the fascists, they're not stupid. And Nazis aren't idiots. There's one thing that they understand very well. That's good optics. And good optics is something that we on the left could really stand to learn a little bit about. Part of those optics is that all of the Nazis and neoliberals tend to wear suits. And all manner of propaganda makes us believe that people that wear suits are good, honest individuals who should be respected. I mean, we as anarchists, socialists, communists, and so forth probably don't believe that, but the majority of people don't see people wearing suits as the enemy. They see them as being good guys. So when you have somebody like Richard Spencer, who is wearing a suit, holding himself quite well, talking very elegantly to the camera, even though what he's saying is absolutely reprehensible, and then you all of a sudden have somebody from Antifa come and punch him in the face. The person from Antifa is dressed in black, their face is covered, they look like a thug, they seem like a criminal. I would never condone violence, but if you are going to hit somebody, I would suggest that you dress up not like a mass marauder, but more like, I don't know, a plumber or a nurse. At least that way it looks like the Nazi is getting punched out by a regular individual. If you put that show on mute, who is going to look like the aggressor in this situation? It's going to be the good guy. We don't want that to happen. That's why you have to think tactically. But that also means that you don't want to fall into the liberal trap. Holding hands outside of a Denny's in the dedicated free speech zone will not make change. Voting will not make change. And making a change.org petition will not make change. So, then you ask yourself, how do we fight these people? We can't hit them, and we can't take the high ground, so what do? Well, it's simple. We have to give them a stronger message. So what does that mean? What is this message? What am I talking about? Well, let's go back to the very beginning. Remember, at the very start of this, I introduced the topic by saying, know your enemy as you know yourself. Now let's get to know them. How do you think that we would do that, though? Should we go spying on their community? Should we start tapping their phone lines? Should we put intel agents into each one of their Facebook channels and just find out every single little thing that they're doing? Well, maybe that might not hurt, but a better solution would be to know their tactics. So what are their tactics? Well, that's something we're going to get into in the next video with the first tactic, control the conversation. Thanks for watching. It is important when you're at war to remember the saying, know your enemy as you know yourself. In the last episode we talked about ourselves, and in this episode we're going to talk about the enemy and their tactics. So what are their tactics then? Anybody who's seen the alt-right playbook will have a good understanding of what I'm talking about here because we're going to touch on a few of those subjects. Alright, tactic number 1. Control the conversation. I'm going to ask all you people out there, what is the point of debate? It's to show that you're right, isn't it? I mean, it's to prove that you have the best knowledge, that you have the most accurate information, that you have studied the most precise graphs, correct? Well, no. It's not about that at all. The point of debate is to look strong in front of your audience. You're rarely ever going to be able to convince somebody of a different opinion through a debate. The only thing a debate does is elevate an insane opinion to the same level as a sane one. But the idea is to convince the audience, not to convince the other person. Alright, so let's talk about the tactics then. The left like to tackle incorrect arguments by giving long, detailed explanations. Perfectly understandable. But the right, on the other hand, gives baiting, short, quippy, yet wrong arguments, then moves the goalpost to change the argument when it fails, and then when that fails, they just strawman your argument. So, for example, they might come and say something like, women are treated equal in the workforce by law. And you may retort, saying to them, actually, women make 78 cents on the dollar in comparison to men. And when talking about STEM, women are extremely underrepresented. And then maybe you might give them a bunch of studies or quotes in the same vein. But that doesn't work because they easily bat that away by saying, well, fake news, feminists want more rights than men. Ugh. And you have to say to them, no, while feminists around the world have different causes, goals, and intentions depending on the time, culture, and country, most Western feminist historians say that feminist movements are created to obtain equal rights. No more, no less. But that doesn't work because all they do is come back to you and say, yeah, well, you know what? Third wave feminists hate prostitution. Should hookers not have equal rights? This shouldn't be effective, but it is. That's how Trump happened. But why is that? What exactly are the problems with this leftist tactic? Okay, well, let's go through them. The right-winger provoked and baited you. They changed the conversation to make it in their terms. Every short, quippy remark that they made, you gave a long, drawn-out response. And if you know anything from Ronald Reagan, he once said that if you're explaining, you're losing. And if you're always explaining, then you're always losing. So the right-winger won by looking like a winner. Well, that's all fine and good, but what would be a direct action solution that we could use to combat this situation? Well, Direct action solutions, in my understanding, come in 4 different ways. There's imitation, aggressive, passive, and violent. So let's go through them. Imitation would be pretty straightforward. It's to use their tactic against them. So if they come and say women are treated equal in the workforce by law, you could say something to the effect of, you actually think that everyone follows the law? And they would retort saying, well, no, not everyone follows the law, but if a company treats women unequally, they would get punished by law. And you just simply retort by saying, you put a lot of trust in government ability, don't you? Knowing that most right-wingers don't like big government, that cognitive dissonance starts to kick in, and they'll just say, I don't trust the government to do anything. They're a bunch of weasels and assholes. Congratulations, you were able to achieve the exact same goal as the right-winger was able to do in the first place. You looked strong in front of your audience, and eventually you were able to garner capitulation from the enemy. That's exactly what you want, if you want to convince people on your own side. This tactic rarely works to convince anybody but people who are already leaning in your direction. Another tactic would be an aggressive tactic. So, for example, they could say women are treated equal in the workforce by law, and you could come back to them by simply asking, does every workforce follow the law? They would say, no, not everyone follows the law, but if a company treats women unequally, they would get punished by law. So then you come back and ask the same question, just slightly reworded. So women are not treated equal in the workforce. And they'd say, no! Most companies follow the law, but some might not. I mean, it depends on where it is. Come on, women are treated equal where I work. To which you simply ask again, so women are not treated equal in the workforce? See, this tactic is aggressive journalism 101. You never let the subject change. You keep asking the same question over and over, and eventually you just allow them to hang themselves. And again, that tactic is more or less a middling response. It will gain some attention from the opposite side, but mostly just appeals to people on the left that you already have convinced. So, what's the passive solution? Well, a debate doesn't necessarily have to always be a fight. Sometimes it can be a stroll down a road. For example, the Yellow Vesters here in Canada are angry about pipelines. All that is simply just code for jobs. They lost their jobs when the pipelines shut down, when the oil industry took a turn, all of that sort of thing. So we have to help them find a solution to their problem. And that's socialism. So how would this example go? It would go like this. They would say, women are treated equal in the workforce by law. And you would respond, well, actually, no one in the workforce is treated equally by law. And they would retort, what? And you could simply say, after paying for overhead, your boss earns 10 times your salary. Do you honestly think that he works 10 times harder than you? To which they would reply, well, absolutely not. And you could say, well, that seems pretty unequal to me. And the workers unite to seize control of production. By framing the argument in economic terms, you're able to direct their anger away from their scapegoat, whether it be women or immigrants or what have you, and you can direct it toward the actual problem, the state, fascism. But then of course you might ask yourself, okay, Aaron, if fighting fascism is about fighting the state, then why are we talking about debating Nazis? You even just said that the Nazis and the neoliberals are just goons of the state. They're not even a part of the state. The thing is, we're not debating Nazis and neoliberals. We're talking about public opinion. The fact of the matter is somebody is going to get the spotlight, whether it be left or right, somebody is going to get it. So our goal is to make sure that it is not the fascists, it is us. If the far right have control of the message, they are going to promote state propaganda. That's just simply how it works. And when we fight propaganda, we are, in essence, fighting the state. Fighting fascism. So that means that fighting propaganda can be done every day by anyone. Even your grandmother can help bring down the state. In the next video, we're going to be talking about tactic number 2. They go low, we go high. Thanks for watching. So tactic number 2. They go low, we go high. When liberals want something done, they like to take the high road. They do it by the book. They focus on process. They follow the letter of the law. They iron out every single detail. They do research and scientific testing, and they try to find a compromise. And if somebody is disruptive or uncivil, they inevitably just mock them or ignore them. But when the right wants something done, they do it. Laws or morality be damned. So for example, here in Canada, the right hates Trudeau. So when they heard about the Yellow Vest movement, they usurped the message and began to march about pipelines and hanging the Prime Minister. They actively touted conflict with Liberals, got media attention, and promoted a message of hate. Their goal was to change laws, and the fascist way of doing that is by force, numbers, and deceptive tactics. While the left is focused on compromise or mockery, the right focuses on the goal. The right actively goes low to force you to go high. They bait you. A great example of how the far right and neoliberalism has completely pacified the left is the fact that we never ever want to do any sort of direct action towards any aggressive tactic that Nazis or the far right use. Where I'm from, when the Nazis started marching in the streets, the only thing that the liberals could come up with was to institute something called a clown count, which would be that every single Nazi that shows up marching in the streets with a yellow vest on, they would donate $1 to a charity of their choice. They said Planned Parenthood. But what liberals don't understand is while we're counting, they're recruiting. And eventually, there won't be a Planned Parenthood to donate the money to. Now, this doesn't mean that process isn't important, but we should focus less on how we should go about things and focus more on what things we should go about. That doesn't mean you should let the ends justify the means, but you should never value the means at the expense of the ends. Far-right agitators have absolutely no problem provoking, intimidating, offending, or harassing anyone and everyone into compliance. Our response should never be to compromise or to simply mock them. So, what is a direct action solution? Again, we have our 4 variables: imitation, aggressive, passive, or violent. Imitation. We hate fascism, so when we hear about the Yellow Vest movement, we get everyone we know to take that message and begin to march about job loss and the environment. We actively conflict with capitalist machinery like cops and neoliberals, get media attention, and promote a message of socialism. The aggressive tactic would be that we hate fascism, so when we hear about the Yellow Vest movement, we take that message and call every anti-fascist that we know. When they show up, we wear masks, hold flags, and overwhelm them. We actively conflict with Nazis, block their message, and promote peace. Of course, the passive solution would be that we hate fascism, so when we hear about the Yellow Vest movement, we take that message and begin to engage with common people about a socialist solution to our own problems. We take our message door to door, put out leaflets, talk to people online. We give the people the right solutions, or else the Nazis will give them the wrong one. And then when it comes to pass, we march with common people and get media attention to promote a message of socialism. And of course, violent direct action would be to just hit everybody with your car. Probably won't look very good for our cause on the news. In the next video, we're going to be talking about tactic number 3, infantilizing the opponent while legitimizing themselves. Thanks for watching. Finally, the third tactic that the far right likes to use is something that I call infantilizing the opponent and legitimizing yourself. The far right is going to say that you're inexperienced, PC, an SJW, a crybaby who is unrealistic and not serious, while they themselves are experienced, powerful, cause-driven leaders who are down to earth and very, very serious. Now this is just another liberal trap because liberals have nothing to offer. Centrism's only philosophy is to uphold the status quo. Capitulation to power often achieves this goal, so you're not going to see any help from anybody from the center, from liberals. For example, the right paints the left as upset about trivialities, against free speech, they're children, they're over-emotional, they want stuff for free, and they dress and act in such non-traditional, weird kind of ways that we just don't understand, so therefore we're scared of. And unfortunately, liberals embrace this stereotype. Now that's how the right paints the left. Now how does the right paint themselves? Well, they paint themselves by saying that they're thick-skinned, they're pro-free speech, they're not young, they're in their prime, they're restrained, practical, and they dress and act dapper and traditionally. The problem is that liberals embrace this stereotype too. You see, liberals will give respect to the right regardless of if they're complete buffoons. It goes back to the whole point on debate, where you elevate a completely absurd topic to the same level as a completely realistic topic. Liberal outlets like CNN will never give you the full truth, they'll just give you both sides, and Really, all that does is capitulate to the right. And honestly, the right is gonna say that you're a cuck mangina PC liberal pussy anyway, so fuck 'em. So then you may ask, what is a direct action solution? Again, imitation, aggressive, passive, or violent. So an aggressive tactic would be to dress alternatively, argue with bigots, make posts calling people out, get into verbal confrontations in person, and agitate. The passive solution would be basically the same as the imitation, which would be to dress in a suit or your nicest clothes, talk with the disenfranchised, find socialist solutions, make posts helping people on Facebook, get into verbal conversations in person, and agitate and mobilize. And of course, there is always the violent tactic, where you dress in tactical gear, curb stomp bigots, make posts releasing personal information, get into physical confrontations in person, and agitate and terrorize. Again, that doesn't look very good for our cause. That being said, you should have the right to defend yourself against state violence. And remember, the state holds on to its authority by having their goons dressed in tactical gear, curb stomping the people, incarcerating whistleblowers, getting into physical confrontations in person, and agitating and terrorizing the public. And as the old adage goes, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. In the next video, we're going to be talking about the solution. Thanks for watching. So, this is it. Nazis are marching in the streets, businesses are shutting down, people are distressed and depressed all over the place. And through this entire series, I've been alluding to a solution. But what exactly is it that we've been talking about this whole time? What is it that we are actually saying? Unity, language, and visibility. That's what we're talking about here. These are the tools that you need to use to consolidate power. The far right wants you broken up and disjointed. Talking to people about socialist solutions builds alliances. Visibility gives you the sense of numbers, and good optics gains you more support. Numbers will give the public motivation to act, and a strong message will give them the strength for actual change. And finally, common language forms alliances. 99% of us are struggling while 1% hoard the wealth. That is an anchor that we can pretty much latch on to any single person that we talk to. You have to understand that populist messages for the majority lean left wing, and we need solidarity between all people, not just on the left, but on the right as well, because it's going to take all of us to be able to make real change. At this point, I'd like to give a shout out to Bo from the 5th column. He turned me on to Rule 303. Rule 303 is, if you have the might at hand, you have the responsibility to use it. Our collective knowledge is our might in this situation. We have a responsibility to tell the public what we know and to get them to help themselves. We need to be prepared, and up until now we haven't been, and this is inevitably just going to get worse. We have talked for years about every single problem that the economy, that society, that industry has, and up until now few people have offered anything in the way of a solution. Well, here's your solution. My proposal is a passive solution called the mass line, and I know a few of you out there already know where I'm going with this. The mass line is the primary Marxist method of revolutionary leadership of the people. And to achieve a mass line, you have to have mass perspective. Mass perspective means recognizing the masses are themselves the only force which can revolutionize society, and the masses have to discover these revolutionary goals through their own struggles, while socialists like us are here to help guide them. So how do we get mass perspective? Number 1, understand who your audience is and what they want. Number 2, focus on sparking action, not just raising awareness. And number 3, achieve specific results. Talk with regular people, neighbors, co-workers, friends, family. Discover what issues they have in these troubling times. It may be economic, environmental, financial, etc. These issues may be vague or confused or disjointed, but it's our job to focus the topic onto a strong message or a line. For example, they may be angry that immigrants are flooding into the country from overseas. Now, this obviously isn't possible and very wrong, but you have to look past the propaganda. Immigrants are a scapegoat. It's a code word for a real issue. Maybe they feel like they're losing something. Maybe it's job security or personal safety or something along those lines. Take the conversation away from immigrants and find a solution to the root problem. If job security is actually the issue, you could explain to them that capitalists are the ones that are encouraging migration and they're the ones hiring them. There isn't any sense in blaming somebody that has no money and no power. Or maybe they are worried about personal safety or terrorism, and you can change that to reflect that capitalists are the ones that create the conditions for those situations to happen, be it underfunding schools or not having proper drug coverage that allows for people to end up on the streets addicted to drugs. Find an anchor that appeals to them and work off of that. Our goal is to find a socialist solution. So now that you've got it into their mind that it isn't about immigration, it's about job security. Well, a very simple socialist solution to job security is worker co-ops. Allow the workers to have the vote so they don't have the chance of losing their jobs to automation, immigration, or consolidation of a fucking monopoly. Another social-ish solution would be to tax multinational corporations and big businesses properly and then take that money and invest it in local businesses. And if the problem is personal safety, then simply instituting something as simple as a living wage or debt elimination or universal drug coverage would allow the impoverished people who are committing crimes to get out of poverty so they wouldn't have to commit crimes. It's a simple socialist solution, something that is able to be put onto a banner and marched for. Of course, we revolutionaries should genuinely try to help the masses with their daily struggles, but that is not the main reason for our existence as revolutionaries. Our work towards satisfying the long-term needs of the masses is even more important than our work could ever be in support of their immediate and temporary interests. Remember, do not let the ends justify the means, but never value the means at the expense of the ends. I reiterate, focus less on how we should go about things and more on what things we should go about. If we're talking about solutions and not the process, then people will want to join us. If we're only talking about process, then people will have no interest. Okay, so before I conclude part 1, there are 3 points that are left to be said, and those go as follows. Marches, rallies, sit-ins, and protests will happen by themselves, so we need the masses to be informed before they take to the streets independently. 2. We need to be involved in any and all demonstrations as possible to gain allies and support. 3. It is important for us to organize actions of our own. In the next video series, we're going to be talking about direct action advanced, sit-ins, walkouts, protests, and state violence. Thanks for watching. Oh, if you noticed at the beginning of the video I had a bunch of weird shit in my hair, yeah, those are elastic bands. I'm trying to do everything I can to fix them up a little bit. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. My name is Aaron. Please check out my Patreon. Every dollar does help fund this show. And stay tuned. Thanks for watching.